The channel is Murphy Media. I'm your host, Michael. The mission of the channel is to provide the unique stories of the individuals that are serving the cause of Ukraine, serving in Ukraine as volunteers, soldiers, or as trainers. Today, we've been fortunate enough to be joined by Ian of DynamicAcquisitions as he details his experience and his contribution to the Ukrainian cause. In the description below, you will find the website for Dynamic Acquisitions and the donation page. Take a look at their group, listen to the interview, and decide for yourself. But if you do choose to make a donation, Dynamic Acquisitions is funded by your generosity. $5, $10, $100, $1,000, $10,000. It will go a very long way and will be very much appreciated by Ian and company. The goal here at the channel is to provide you the story of people like Ian and to continue to share that and make good quality content and document these people and their experiences as this war drags on. If you would, for me, like the video, click to subscribe and share the video as far and wide as you possibly can. We look forward to creating more content for you, and we'll see you in the next one. Thank you very much. Okay, we are live today with Ian of Dynamic Acquisitions. This is our third attempt at getting this recorded. For all our viewers, we've encountered some technical difficulties, but I think we've ironed everything out. So, Ian, I know this isn't something that you do very often, so I appreciate you weathering the storm with me on my end. This is a new thing for me, so we're ironing out some bugs. I appreciate the positivity and the encouragement on your end. So we're gonna run back through these questions we've got here. The information that you've been able to pass on to me so far has been excellent. You've answered questions in a very unique and informative way. So we'll run through that again, and we'll start just a little background on yourself and on Dynamic Acquisitions. How did you get into this? And we'll flesh it out from there.
Sure. Relevant experience to Ukraine. Law enforcement, 6 years. Graduated the academy in 2016. Have probably 3 or 4 of those years in various special teams. So our high risk warrant service, special response team, and SWAT. Depending on what office or agency you happen to be at the time, the nomenclature of that may change, along with a lot of other things. I've had the opportunity in my career I was very fortunate to go to a lot of great schools, especially in the area that I operate and work in. Not too many people get those opportunities. So I was able to go to great marksmanship schools, great combat pistol rifle schools, schools for mindset, schools for leadership, problem solving. And that kind of all acclimated into eventually creating this training company, which is Dynamic Acquisitions. As far as my, relevant experience, spent a little time in the Navy. Back when I was 18, nothing relevant there. Didn't even make it out of the training center. So for the third time in a row, I really like this joke, so I'm gonna sling it. But the only thing I learned was how to drown and how to fold my underwear. So that rings true right now as much as it did the first time I told you. I don't still fold my underwear. It's a kind of sort of rebellion at this point. But going through that experience as a young man was insanely valuable. Absolutely kind of molded and put me on a path, for the rest of my life that in one way or another, service was going to be something I was going to be involved in. Found my way to the police academy, really enjoyed it. Still to this day, really enjoy law enforcement. I'm still an active law enforcement officer. So when I return to the States, it'll be business as usual, back to the same thing. So 6 years into being a cop, having all this training, and you can always train more, but I felt like I had a good portion of it under my belt. Got with a few friends who I went through the academy with, both of which are military veterans, both of which have foreign deployments, both of which bring a lot to the table as far as tactical training is concerned. So about late 2021, we got together, and there was just no excuse not to do something with that experience. We really enjoyed training, all of us. It was just bringing it all together. So we came up with some programs, basic pistol, basic rifle, and CQB. fleshed it out, created a syllabus, and started to offer that to the police and civilian market. And it wasn't too long after the LLC was finalized and we got classes kicked up that, the invasion of Ukraine went down. So it was definitely in its infancy. It was working out great, and we kind of made a unanimous decision that things had to be put on hold for a greater purpose. So yeah, man, Dynamic is your run-of-the-mill tactical training cadre. We all, the three of us, bring some unique perspectives, coming from various backgrounds, and I really believe that the syllabus is good and solid. And the experience we've had so far with training, whether it be domestically or here internationally in Ukraine, the feedback has been great, and all three of us really enjoy it. So, I mean, that's history as it's written so far, at least.
Sure. I appreciate that. And service is something that you talk about quite a bit. It's very much part of your life, very much part of the fabric of what you do. Can you talk about taking that spirit of service and going to Ukraine? What inspired you to do that? I know there were steps involved. It wasn't quite we're going to go now, but can you talk about the lead up and then what finally pushed you over the top to take your experience and your knowledge and make a difference in Ukraine?
Sure, man. Law enforcement and me have a really weird relationship. Um, it was never something I wanted to do as a kid. It was never something that was, in the back of my mind in college. It really is just one of those things that happened. I happened to be in the right place at the right time with the right people, and it made sense. So once I got into law enforcement, I realized that it had created kind of this therapeutic addiction where I knew at the end of the day, if I'd gone out and done more than what was asked of me and what would be normally asked of a normal person, um, it helped me deal with a lot of things. It helped me deal with, past traumatic experiences, things that I've gone through really tended to, dissipate when we had a hard day at work. Um, so that became in itself kind of an addiction. I knew we were doing a good job. I still believe that police in the United States are doing a good job and they're doing the right thing. And that in some way was my therapy. The harder we worked, the worse the day was, the better I felt the day after. Of course, that comes with its own baggage. It's not all great, but um, service in a way is kind of how I sleep at night. Uh, other if I don't have something going on that is substantial in its capacity, I don't sleep. My mind runs 1,000 miles an hour, and I try to solve problems that aren't mine. So, 6 years into law enforcement, I was looking for that next thing. Um, I'd gone through basic SWAT school, which was challenging. I loved it. We were working on the high risk warrant team, full time, you name it. I was going to every school that I could possibly convince, upper echelon to send me to, and was also looking into the federal police pipeline. That was the goal at the time. And about the time all those things culminated was February of 22. Um, I was just about to land that first meeting, to start that federal law enforcement recruitment process. SWAT school was still fresh, and I remember waking up and seeing the headlines, that Russia had invaded Ukraine. And it was something that I was aware of prior to, the invasion date. I'd seen Ukraine continually popping up. I had, mutual contacts and organizations that I was aware of that were over there, operating, whether in a training capacity or kinetically, but they were there. Occasionally would try to get involved with donations and humanitarian aid for things going to, the Eastern Front. But it was never at that time, we've got to go and involve ourselves. We've got to go and implement ourselves in what's going on there. So the invasion happens, and I wake up, I put it on all four TVs. I've got Ukrainian news rolling. I'm trying to soak up all this information, and I remember the feeling being very reminiscent of, watching the invasion of Iraq and Afghanistan, watching 9/11 unfold, like knowing that this is a substantial event, in my lifetime. And it has certainly proved to be exactly that. So the invasion kicks off, and really it's business as usual. Go to work the next day. We started to put a couple things in the works as far as the company was concerned. We were selling, lines of like funny, veteran-esque tactical community merchandise. T-shirts, hats, stickers, that kind of stuff. Um, and they were going to different facets of what we had going on, either training or charity. And then it kind of focal point on Ukraine. We started rolling out some merchandise for Ukraine. We started sending that out to some reputable charities that I'd done some research on, but it still at that point was not like uh, an urgency to be physically present. And then, the weeks go by, and we see the liberation of Bucha near Pin early in 2022. We see, the training that's taken place. We see the utter devastation and barbaric nature of this conflict that still continues now. And it was kind of a culmination of those two things. So seeing the civilian cost of this war was kind of the reason. The first images to be released out of Bucha, first images out of Irpin, the things going on in Mariupol, uh, those are forever burned, into my psyche. Just like 9/11, just like Iraq and Afghanistan, things that happened there, just, they don't leave you. They either affect you or they don't. And these were certainly substantial to me. And so that was the reason, like, innocent people are dying, and these people are overwhelmed and they're unprepared. And then we started to see the training. Media was starting to get a hold of some of these civilian-led training programs where people were training with wooden guns, where even the army was severely unequipped with old body armor, old weapons, and along with both of those things comes old tactics. And so that was the purpose. So it was a combination of like this is my emotional driving force, and this is what I'm able to do about it, to try to improve it. And so I got on the phone, man. I called my other two guys, and I was like, do we have a snowball's chance in hell of really making an impact over there? Is it something we should consider? The goal from the beginning with Dynamic was not to become, some privatized military corporation or some, international humanitarian aid or NGO. That was not the purpose. The purpose was to provide tactical training to cops and civilians. And, the my other two friends having foreign deployments were like, yeah, I really think we have the tools to at least help. And if we have the ability and the funds to get over there, then it's something we should consider. So we drafted up a big plan. We had the whole battle map and the whiteboard and everything going on. And again, the whole focus was to provide training. There really wasn't a focus on being kinetic or joining the Legion or being involved in combat. All three of us were prepared for that to be a circumstance of where we were, but not to be involved directly. So time goes on. I start to make connections, do the best I can to create some kind of network for us to fall back on, plan A through Z of all the contingencies. And of course, you never have enough. And, it's getting down to that day. And my two guys, they had pretty momentous circumstances in their personal lives that happened one on top of the other for both of them. And it was kind of like a very hesitant, slow bowing out because they didn't want to say it. They didn't want to say, you know what, I can't make this happen right now for these circumstances that I can't control. But slowly but surely, both of them, said, man, we just can't afford to do this. We have other things going on. And I understand, to this day, we still work together. They're still part of the company. They've helped me immensely, on the back end in the States. They're great guys, but this just wasn't in the cards for them. And after we had that conversation, and the plane's leaving, I just couldn't say no. I've kind of spearheaded all this preparation. I become pretty enveloped in the situation. It was a 24-hour a day thing. It was work for 12 days or 12 hours, excuse me, and then come home for the next 8 or 10 hours and try to make some headway on this, job in Ukraine. And I didn't bow out, man. I had an experience with culture shock. In my mid-20s, I went to Japan. I was an international studies major in college. And I thought, I've been to a foreign country before. I've been by myself before. How hard could this possibly be? Let's all bets are off. Let's just go do it. So there I was, on an international flight by myself with more equipment than I could probably one person should be carrying. Um, Funny story about that, and we haven't talked about it before, but I arrived at the airport with probably the largest military sea bags you can buy. You could fit several adult male human bodies in these easily. And they were absolutely packed, man. I had guys from the Marine Corps, corpsmen sending me, IV starter kits, bone marrow IV kits, chest seals. Vacuum packed bag after bag after bag. And then another bag was all my personal kit, all the military gear that I'd been given to donate. And I got to the airport and came to the conclusion that there is just no way to get this shit, on this flight. I frantically for about 20 or 30 minutes ran around the airport trying to recruit someone to assist me to get these bags to my flight, and it just the time window was not there. So a lot of that stuff got left. I was able to bring it my second trip back here in about November of last year, but um, it was a mess, man. From day one, minute one, second one, anything that could go wrong did go wrong. But eventually, about 4 to 5 days later, I rolled across the border into Ukraine.
That's fantastic. I didn't know how much more new ground we'd be able to cover since we've talked so much. Um, for everybody tuning in, this is Murphy Media. We are joined today with Ian of DynamicAcquisitions. Ian, you had talked about the training facility that's been set up for you guys and how that came into be, and it was kind of the same thing: right place, right time, and the right connections. Do you want to give us a rundown on the facility and what exactly it is that you guys do there? And then afterwards, I thought we'd break CQB down into 3 parts as we did yesterday.
Sounds good, man.
Awesome.
So the facility that we're fortunate enough to operate in right now um, is one of the best opportunities that I've had in Ukraine thus far. I've been here pretty much nonstop for a year and a half. I've operated training facilities. I've operated, close to the front, 5 kilometers back, drawing lines in dirt. About anywhere that you can teach close quarter fighting, that's what I've been doing. Um, that's what I have to offer these guys. I try to train what I know and try to just shut up about what I don't. And so I've seen it all, dude. We've trained CQB in bombed out buildings. Some of the photos you can see on the Instagram are in there. We've trained CQB drawing lines in the dirt, 5 kilometers back from the front. And then we've, trained CQB in safer areas. We've trained CQB in Kyiv and Odessa, and whatever they had. However, where I'm located at now, they have a pretty much up to standard shoot house, which is something I've only heard myths of in Ukraine before. I throughout the months, it was like, well, I saw one here, or I know that this particular special operations group, they have one here. Well, I've never had access to those or laid eyes on them. And so I arrived at this location and had really an intention to train, but no connections here. This was my like kind of last 3 to 4 months in country, and I picked this spot for a multitude of reasons. However, the first reason wasn't to train. It was that was going to be after the fact of a few other things I had to take care of. And then maybe 2 or 3 days of getting here, within this network of foreign volunteers that we have, a message pops up, is somebody in this location. Let me say beforehand, this is a place that training has never happened for any of the individuals, Sabre, Task Force 31, all these guys that train. Nothing has had ever really taken place here. And then all of a sudden, someone I just happen to know, an acquaintance that was also in Ukraine, is someone in this location? Can someone train A, B, and C? Can you get a hold of me? And it was like, it was just another right place, right time. And I can't tell you, how true that is, that Ukraine and the volunteer effort really operates on it just happened, it just materialized, whether it was a blessing or whatever you want to talk about. But it really came out of nowhere. And that happens time and time and time again. You just happen to be the right guy, right place, right time. So I made this connection, sat down with a meeting with this guy I'd never met before. And he was like, we're really interested. We've seen that you train CQB. We're really interested in that program. What do you need to train in? And I go, we're pretty versatile. We can pretty much train anywhere. We've proved that over the last year. And he's like, yeah, but ideally, what would you need? And I said, well, a shoot house would be great, which is just a mock construction of any kind of structure, a house, office building, whatever it might be. But its main goal is to facilitate CQB training. And he goes, we have one of those. And at that moment, I was blissful, man. It was like there's no way that just by chance we ran into the one training gig that was going to suit us perfectly. And lo and behold, a couple days later, he takes me to the facility. I walk into this place, and there it is. It is exactly what it is. It's a plywood kill house with movable doors, multiple rooms, multiple corridors. Absolutely amazing. And they were all curious. The whole command element was there. What do you think? And I go, guys, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen in Ukraine, period. Like, I'm so excited to see this, and I'm really excited to get started. But that really wasn't the end of it. They wanted this to be up to my standard from day one. And they go, whatever changes you want to make to this structure, you draw it on this piece of paper, and in a week you'll have it. And that is no shit what happened. I drew, you know, a particular structure that had all the areas for each training point where we'd have to, break down certain movements, certain rooms, certain entries and exits, and they built it all. And they built it in that week. The guys were in there till 1 in the morning, taking wall-sized pieces of the plywood and putting them together. So now we operate 5 days a week. Class sizes vary from about 4 to 8 for an instructor class and 10 to 20 for just a regular student class. 5 to 6 hours a day, and it's nonstop. Occasionally, I will travel to train on the weekends as well. So this is this wheel is always turning, man. And it kind of goes back to that comment I said about satiating this addiction to work, and how that's therapeutic to me. The people around me are constantly concerned that I don't get enough sleep. That are you okay? Did you eat today? Did you do normal human stuff? And the short answer is no. Occasionally I'll get around to it, but the cycle that we're in now with the facility we have, the support we have from the Ukrainians, it is phenomenal. I've never seen anything like it. It was a absolute shift from what we were doing before. And this, to comment on the facility, it is not exactly the paramount standard that you would be used to, as a SWAT team or as a tier 1 unit or whatever you might be in the United States. But it's damn close, and it's certainly that caliber as far as Ukraine's concerned.
That's fantastic. We keep talking about CQB. For our civilian audience, of which I am a part, I've had the opportunity in talking with you to dive into CQB, close quarter battle. And in the material that I've been able to study, and you're going to be able to talk about this at length, and this is a fascinating subject. There are three parameters, three principles of CQB, and something we didn't talk about yesterday, and then I want to dive into those things. And I thought this was fascinating. Everything I've seen about CQB breaks down interoperability for the team with their weapons platform. And I was curious today while I was diving into this a little bit more, is that, and when I say that, I'm talking about a standardized rifle, a standardized pistol, so on. And everything that I watched, they stress the importance of the team executing CQB, having that same platform. Is that something that you guys have the luxury of over there? I know here, in the information I had, it may be dated. The Green Berets were who I was looking at, the CAG, and they operated at that time on M4s. What kind of platforms are we talking? Do you have the luxury of interoperability for parts for whatever situation may arise?
Sure. I mean, among the many, many challenges of training here in Eastern Europe, one of the biggest challenges is weapon systems. You can talk about these weapons being brought into Ukraine and being distributed and whatever, but how the truth of the matter is most of these guys still have what they started with in February, and that's what the government could provide to them. So that's the AK platform, usually in the 74 variant, and that weapon is not particularly conducive to CQB, and that is only because of how the safety mechanism on that weapon works. Unless it's modified, it's really something that you have to take the gun out of the fight to manipulate the safety, because of how the mechanism works. So with an AR-15 or an M4, you just have a thumb selector switch and you can be on and off that thing as you move throughout a building, and that's how we're trained. Many people might have the stipulation of, we see these guys go in the building, well, it's time to go to work, so they run safety off all the time. Well, that's not true. You run with the safety on, and when you ID a threat, that safety comes off, and it becomes part of these automatic mechanisms of how you manipulate that weapon. The AK, unfortunately, is dated, man, and it's starting to really show its age, especially, in a modern conflict. It's an effective weapon to a particular range. The ammunition is everywhere here. There's a lot of parts for them, and they're cheap. So it benefits the Ukrainians in that way. However, when it comes to implementing modern training doctrine, especially Western training doctrine, we don't really have a playbook for the AK. We have a playbook for, bringing it to zero, making it accurate, and the fundamentals of the weapon, how to reload it, how to fix it, those kind of things. When it comes to implementing that into a CQB environment, the gloves come off because it is kind of a nightmare to work with in close quarters. The profile of the weapon, pretty similar to, what you would see NATO running, which is, the AR platform for most. Unless they've modified it a good bit, it still has that fixed stock, which means, if you're a short guy with short arms, you're going to have a bad time. If you're a long guy with long arms, you're going to have a bad time, unless you're the exact measurements that are meant for that stock. And as far as our classes are concerned, and this goes back all the way to day one training here, you never know what you're going to get. Absolutely not. It is always a mixed bag of AKs, guys who have gone out and purchased their own ARs. That is starting to be pretty prevalent now, people bringing their personal weapons. Occasionally, you'll have a unit that distributes some ARs, but you'll notice that they're not distributed to everyone. They're distributed to certain individuals. And we've had guys with light machine guns taking CQB. We've had guys with PKMs and long-barreled RPKs. And it is a challenge. It's possible, but it takes a lot of patience and dedication to kind of come up with a syllabus that supports these weapons that are not naturally conducive to that environment. So as far as what I see, we can talk about pistols. Pistols are a pivotal role in almost all combat arms, from law enforcement to military. Even when you get into the civilian market, having that emergency weapon or that sidearm, a lot of tactics are based on having that backup. And pistols are not something that are common here. Especially modern pistols. So what you might see in the US or with NATO forces in your Glocks and SIGs, I have seen maybe 2 Glocks in a year and a half. And one was civilian owned and one was military. I haven't seen hardly any other modern platform. It's the old Makarov, the Tokarev TT, and these pistols and these rifles are dated 1940 to 1960, somewhere in that window. And I've seen some that are dated even earlier as far as the pistols are concerned. But they are not prevalent. I try to substitute that by teaching pistol tactics, even if they don't have them. I had the luxury of being able to buy replicas of my weapons. They're set up the exact same as I have them in the States. They're just non-functional. They're airsoft weapons. Um, but they function the same, they reload the same, and they look and feel the same. So I try to at least give them the opportunity to get on those platforms, get a feel for what grip is, what a good shooting position is on modern weaponry. And we have a pistol portion in the CQB course. These guys get the opportunity. However, I would say maybe on a good day, 30% of them have pistols. Um, I have worked with the police forces here and the special police teams. They have pistols, but none of them are modern. They're all Makarovs or Tokarevs. Um, and the SOPs that they follow for carrying a sidearm are absolutely in another galaxy from like NATO Western SOPs or standard operating procedures. Um, they don't carry one in the pipe. So part of their draw is to draw the weapon, charge it, and then present it, which in itself is kind of clashing with this being an emergency weapon. You don't want extra manipulations. You just want to be able to employ that in an emergency situation. So it is constantly a battle, man. I will tell you that we have developed a syllabus for these older weapons. We have developed a syllabus for the AK. Uh, some of them would probably make some lifetime tactical instructors lose their fucking minds. But you really have to be here, be in this environment, and see these guys, see what they have at their disposal for things to make sense to you. We talk about that AK safety manipulation. These guys have to run CQB with that safety off. There's no other way around it, unless it's highly modified, which a lot of them don't have the capability of doing. They have to run safety off. So we'll spend days and days and days on muzzle awareness. Why we put the weapon where we put it? Because these guys are running with hot weapons. They're in stacks. They're in close quarters. So safety is something we not only have to preach, but we have to demand a standard because of the kind of handicap that they're at. But yeah, man, it's a mixed bag. I've seen it all here, and you see some crazy stuff. People will show up with MP5s, or someone will show up with for example, this last class that I taught, CQB class. They know it's CQB class. They know it's close quarters. They know that's my experience, and the guy shows up with a designated marksman rifle. Similar to the SR-25. M16 system. Yeah, big long piece of glass, 18-inch barrel with a fixed like Magpul precision stock. I'm like, bro, that's not gonna work. Like you're gonna have you're gonna have a really hard time. That thing was longer than some of the PKMs that we've worked with. So there is a learning curve, definitely to be implemented about operating on a weapon system that is suitable to the mission, which is something that we go over not only for weapons, but for equipment, that you should situate yourself for success for that particular mission. And that is a luxury of NATO doctrine. But these guys, 1 second could be clearing a building, the next second they could be doing reconnaissance, a day later they could be in a trench. So they unfortunately have to have like the Swiss Army knife of weapons at all times, because of how hectic their mission set is.
And just curious, the Ukraine defense industry, the name I won't even try to pronounce. I know that they've been putting out on a limited scale, and I was curious if you've ran into these, the conversion kits that convert the AK-74 platform into a bullpup rifle. Have you encountered any of those?
I believe the nomenclature for that rifle is the Malyuk. I could be wrong, but it looks
that's correct.
yeah, it looks a lot like the Tavor. It is a bullpup rifle. The guys I've talked to about them seem to not like them. I've never had one in a course. This is only hearsay from some of the guys. I have never encountered that weapon system in Ukraine, eyes on. I know it's here. I know it exists. Uh, the opportunities that I've had to integrate with Ukrainian special operations, they were all running ARs. They were running ARs, Daniel Defense, SIG, that kind of stuff. So I know that thing exists. I'm really interested in it. It's a really cool weapon to me. No surprise, I'm a gun guy. I like this kind of stuff. But I've never laid eyes on it. I've never seen it in training. And I'm probably coming up on the 2,000 some guys trained at this point. So I'm sure it's out there, but it's pretty mythical up to this day.
Kind of the unicorn of Ukrainian platforms.
It seems so.
So diving into CQB, everything I've read, 3 principles. I talked with a veteran friend of mine, and when I said, "Hey, help me formulate some questions here," his go-to, and it seems to be the main 3 principles. It just repeated over and over and over: stealth, speed, violence of action. Yesterday, you detailed all 3 principles. I thought we'd start with stealth, and if you could give us a breakdown. And the way you described this was the speed element was different than anything I'd heard yet, and I thought that was fascinating, very well said. But if we could start with stealth, and then we'll just work our way through.
Sure. Yeah. You can break it down however way you want. Stealth, speed, violence of action. We use speed, surprise, violence of action. The fundamentals are the same. I'll refer to it as surprise. Surprise is really the fundamental basis of how this system functions. It's not what you would immediately think of when you hear stealth or surprise. It's really not about being, some kind of ninja. It's not even really so much about the noise discipline, which does play a part. But it really is more encompassing of the psychology involved in close quarters battle. We do teach these guys how to walk. We start with day 1. We talk about walking heel to toe, why that's important, when it comes to A, noise discipline, and B, being aware of what's under your feet. The areas that these guys operate in mostly are really hectic, very destroyed, a lot of rubble, a lot of uneven ground, and that basis in that footwork really helps them stay upright and mobile. I tell these guys we never run. There's no running involved. There's slow walking and there's fast walking. Believe it or not, fast walking can look like a run, but it's not a run. And so we'll spend days doing movements, not anything to do with room clearing, just moving with a team, moving by yourself, manipulating the weapon at the same time, and getting that footwork, built in. Surprise or stealth is all about the psychological effect that it has on the enemy, and overwhelming them with information where their reaction time is at a handicap. Going into a room where there is an armed combatant is a bad deal for everybody. Your goal as the assault team is to make this as unfair of a fight as possible in your favor. And so surprise or stealth, for me, is about the way these guys enter the room, their areas of responsibility, their points of domination, and how they cover multiple areas at once, address threats simultaneously, and move together. Uh, there is a system of CQB that is highly taught here, that is kind of domestic to Eastern Europe. It's domestic to the Middle East. The Israelis practice on it, and it is an incremental, slow kind of CQB, where you see guys kind of peeking around corners, slowly getting pieces of a room until finally they see as much as they can and they go. It is absolutely effective, but really doesn't hone in on that fundamental of surprise. Um, you don't want to give the enemy an expectation. And so these incremental clearing tactics, if contact is made, the natural body response is to return to that area of safety. So now you give the enemy an expectation of, these guys are coming from here. There's this many of them, and then you start to get into engagements through walls and anything that they can do, throwing grenades to prevent you from entering that room. The system we teach and how surprise plays a fundamental role is, these guys do as much as they can from outside the room, but those thresholds and danger areas are dealt with a compression and presentation. And so that creates kind of the expectation on our team's end that I'm going to take contact. I know where the threat zones are, and I'm going to present immediately to that, which kind of puts the enemy in a reactive state, and that's what we want. We talk about the psychology with these guys, which is a really challenging thing to communicate to them at first, because the task that they're being asked is immense. Ask anybody to go into a room where they know they're going to take contact within 5 meters. That's a big asking of anybody, even someone who's properly trained. But we talk about the psychology, about the human brain, its natural reaction time, and how you can use that in your benefit. So these guys simultaneously and dynamically presenting to these threat areas puts the enemy in a reactive state. So they're going to see the first guy in the room, then they're going to see in the second guy in the room, and by the time that weapon's up, 4 guys are in the room and they're an absolute mess. It's what do I shoot? How many times do I shoot it? What is the biggest threat? And by the time they've processed all that information, the team is trained properly. That should go down in their favor. It's worth stating that sometimes it doesn't. We do prepare these guys for the worst. We talk about taking casualties. We talk about what is the most common casualty taken in CQB, where and why, and how to deal with it. But surprise really plays into a big thing about our psychology, and the effect that you want to induce on the enemy to have that benefit for your team.
And talking about the mixed bag of weapons, and I'm sure that this is something that you run into very infrequently, sound suppressors for the platforms. Is that a common thing? Is that an uncommon thing?
Believe it or not, because of the availability of suppressors here, and by availability, I mean guys just making their own suppressors. There is not really the ATF backlog oversight in Ukraine, and that's true for a lot of Eastern and Northern Europe. Silencers and sound suppressors really don't have the same stigma that they do in the West. They're not as highly controlled, which means they proliferate a lot more. And they are pretty common. We see them a lot on the AR systems. We even see them on the AK systems, and that's something that we really talk about. A lot of these guys do not run ear pro. If you go to a shooting range, there are going to be some dudes out there raw dogging it, just ripping on machine guns, grenades, you name it. They're taking that straight to the eardrums all the time. Of course, a suppressor on a rifle length weapon doesn't really make that hearing safe, um, but it does give a distinct designation of are these my teammates firing? Is this the enemy firing? It does help in that concussion of the round and how that affects your teammates. They are pretty common, much more common than they would be in the equivalent of these units in the NATO atmosphere. When we think about suppressed weapons, in the United States, in the UK, we think about special operations. Our soft teams running suppressed weapons. These guys run suppressed weapons no matter who they are. Civilians, basic army, territorial defense. I've seen suppressors on every weapon system from every unit in a sporadic kind of pattern. But they're definitely prevalent.
That's interesting. And in the speed aspect, this was probably the explanation that you've given about this was probably the most fascinating to me. And you mentioned several times that 2 seconds and the importance of that 2 seconds, putting the enemy on the back foot. If you want to dive into that, that'd be great.
Sure. Speed comes into play in kind of two areas. If you want to think about the literal translation of speed, the fluctuation of slow and fast, why we go fast, why we go slow, when, where, and why. This is really something that is fundamental to the program, and we just like teaching these guys how to walk, we teach them when to put the gas down and when to let up. You know, in a CQB environment, sometimes you function purely off of stimulus, what you can hear, what you can see, sometimes what you can taste. Depends on how close you are. And we teach these guys to react accordingly with their speed, to fluctuate it based on the stimuli. What are they seeing? What is the immediate threat? And when to put the pedal down. So that's integrated into our shoot, move, and communicate portion. How to speed up the team? Whose responsibility is it to speed up the team? And how do we follow through with that all together? And then in another facet, it's about the entry itself. Um, the entry itself, again, kind of backtracks to the idea of the psychology. Um, it's proven time and time again, and we know that the human reaction time settles somewhere around a second. Fractions of a, 3 fractions of a second or a second, somewhere in that time. Uh, Training plays no part in it. Preparedness plays no part in it. It's the flinch response. It's something we all do when something sneaks up on us. It's just that 1 second reaction time. So at the beginning of these courses, we tell the guys the golden standard for your entry is 2 to 2.5 seconds for 4 grown men through a small threshold into a room. And when you tell that to them, especially when they first started, they're like, "You're out of your mind, dude. It's not going to happen." Getting 4 dudes through this door 2 seconds, that's not a long time. As the training progresses, they start to get a different perspective on time, on how much a second is actually worth and what they can do with it. All of these guys meet that standard eventually. That 2 and 2.5 second standard from the first exposure to that threshold to, generally we operate in 4-man teams. So that fourth man in the room, they're able to meet that standard. And so we tell them that, here's your expectation of the uh, kind of order of events. Exposure to the threshold. The second you expose to those threat areas inside the room, that clock starts. And I literally use this nomenclature. These guys are all athletic. They know what a stopwatch is. So I go, think about that athletic stopwatch. Like as soon as you expose, that stopwatch starts. Generally around a second to a second and a half, the gunfight has started. And so we break that down into how we prioritize threats upon entry and what is your expectation for the entire team being in the room, during that gunfight. Each individual, what can they expect to see and encounter? What should be their initial expectations for contact coming into the room? And believe it or not, after 4 or 5 days, this program instills a lot of confidence in these guys. They're able to read the architecture of the room based on what they can see, uh, and they know where their threat areas are, and they present immediately to that. Uh, they start to get a real good idea for when that clock starts and what actions start that clock. And you can see that fluctuation in speed, where the approach in the corridor is slow and methodical. The preparation for the entry is slow and methodical. They use time and security when they have it, and when it's time to go and put the pedal down, they know exactly where they're going, what the expectation is once they get there, and how to deal with it.
That's fantastic. And then the crowning part of this whole thing, where some people would say those two things lead to the fun part, I would imagine, the violence of action component, uh, where all of this has come together, and now it's time to be kinetic. Can you lay that out for us? And as I said, the schools of thought in this. The more I dove into this, talking about the fact that, to me, that there was a debate on the in this community as to whether or not the pistol is on your chest, or if you're using a drop leg holster, whether you're going in with your weapon at a low ready or with the muzzle up. The intricacies of this and the debate within this community really blew me away. And maybe we don't want to get too far into the weeds, but if we could talk about violence of action and what that looks like.
Sure. I mean, violence of action is a very easily defined terminology in that order, is exactly what it sounds like. The CQB environment is hyper violent as it gets. There are, war in itself is all encompassing, is very violent. These guys are exposed to very violent scenarios. Whether it's in a trench or working with a piece of armor or whatever it is. However, being in that intimate environment with your enemy, where you can lock eyes, where you can see, smell, taste them, it is a hyper violent environment, where you have to exude this hyper aggression at all times. It's really, and you'll notice, that correlates between these three fundamentals. It's all about the psychological effect that it has on the enemy. Now, the literal translation is, how many rounds do we have? Should we, put in a particular combatant in a particular situation? How do we deal with, body armor? How do we deal with, eliminating a threat so we can continue this clearance procedure? So what I like to tell these guys is you have to understand that the more aggression and violence you exude creates confidence in the team and takes away confidence from the enemy. You could imagine, waiting to take contact as an enemy defending an interior structure and just hearing nothing but movement and gun battle, again and again and again and again. And we're not talking about small skirmishes. These guys are taught. I was taught. You shoot to the ground. You make contact with that enemy until he is no longer capable of being kinetic, in the reverse direction. And we work on exercises where we'll place mock-up enemies in a room. On that enemy will be a particular round count, 5 rounds, 7 rounds, 10 rounds, something that might seem excessive. But then you get into the reality of ballistics. What do bullets do to people? What is the reaction of body armor? How do different areas on the body respond, to that gunshot trauma? What can you expect their body to do? That also gets them thinking about, what status is my weapon in? Is this thing loaded? Am I ready to go? Can I go to this next area? And we rep that over and over and over again. So these guys get it in their head that, if I'm going to engage an enemy, it's going to be a 5+ round count engagement at least. that I'm going to shoot to eliminate that threat. And that gets even further and further away from this kind of incremental slow clear where you end up, creating these hard points throughout a structure where skirmishes take place. These guys are going into rooms, they're eliminating the threat, really hyper violent, hyper aggression, and they're continuing. And they have to keep up that steam and that momentum throughout the whole structure, throughout the whole operation. So, speed, surprise, violence, action. Those three fundamentals really are rooted in psychology, and they also in turn have a literal definition. But violence of action is probably the most literal in its presentation, where it is just trying to communicate that these guys have to be the big hammer in this operation at all times. And all three of these take a long time to communicate. They take a long time to instill confidence in the technique, because again, you're asking a lot of these guys, and they have to see it working. They have to believe, and it has to be a completely all-encompassing with the entire team. They all have to have confidence in these fundamentals for it to work properly.
So talking about building that confidence and seeing things work properly, force on force is something that is harped on in all the research that I've done in modern day policing, in special forces, so on. Anywhere where CQB is practiced, force on force is a large part of the training. Where you had mentioned that these guys are running hot weapons, are you guys able to do force on force? Do you have the training tools necessary to do that?
To date, I've never had that capability to institute it in a way where, I personally believe they would benefit from it. You're going to get a wide array of arguments on that. Is airsoft or paintball comparable to force on force? Or do you have to go all the way to simunition? For me, it's sims or nothing. There's really no way to translate the urgency of a gunfight, with those pseudo firearms, with paintball or airsoft. It does communicate a point, at least about cover and concealment. What is cover? What is concealment? You can translate those ideas easily with airsoft, but simunition is that level of stress and intensity that you can't get out of the other two. Those rounds fucking hurt. They sound like bullets. They fly like bullets. And it's about as real as you can get, without producing some kind of serious injury. I have never had access to sims here. I've never seen sims used here. I've never seen the kit in order to, convert a firearm. The bolt kits for ARs. I wouldn't even know how you do it with an AK. I've never seen those implemented here. I have talked a lot of people out of using airsoft. I've been involved in some, training scenarios or training programs that weren't necessarily run by Dynamic. And the Ukrainians involved, like, we should use airsoft, we should use paintball. At the end of the day, maybe it benefits somebody. But really, in my opinion, the only thing you can learn from those kind of pseudo firearms is cover and concealment. What are my angles of attack? What is cover? What is hiding me? What is not? Those will do that effectively. But as far as translating the stress and realism of an actual gunfight in a CQB environment, you would have to institute something like simunition. We have had access to, the non-lethal explosives, stun grenades, flashbangs, even the airsoft grenades are pretty accurate. And we're able to use those munitions in training, and quite effectively, actually, because they're still loud. They still create pressure. they teach all the fundamentals of those, but when it comes to firearms, no. I have had the capability to have airsoft and decided against it, and I've never to date seen an actual sim system or a facility that would support simunition in Ukraine thus far.
And in talking about running airsoft and paintball, would that, and I'm just curious, as you said this, would running those platforms, I guess, and running those, is it possible that you're going to end up running those to the point that you're picking up bad habits and getting away from the actual platform that you're going to be taking with you in a CQB situation?
Yeah, the ballistics and rate of fire just aren't realistic. Um, and people just don't bring the same level of seriousness with those weapons. People are going to be unpredictable. They're going to take risks that they wouldn't normally take, which is really going to be a big hit to the confidence of these guys. Um, Armed conflict, when your life is on the line, is a totally different world from when there is no risk of bodily harm. Even when you get into, small wounds or whatever, but uh, it's just a totally different type of warfare. So when you're trying to teach these guys a system that is based in psychology mostly, in the psychological effect that it's going to have on your enemy. If your enemy isn't, receptive to those tactics, because there is no psychological disadvantage, there is no bodily harm, there is no risk of loss of life. It can absolutely build bad habits. Um, Especially when you're talking about paintball, where these weapons aren't even, have the same ergonomics as what a real weapon would have, the real weight, the real ammunition capacity. Uh, they all have a place for sure. If these guys want to train with those things, power to them. If people listening train with those things, power to them. A lot can be done with weapons fundamentals when it comes to airsoft. But when you're talking about ballistics, you're talking about psychology. Um, there really is no equal. Sims is about as close as you're going to get. I've had the opportunity to work with Sims in my career, and it does induce stress. It does induce that stress response. It does play into the psychology to a certain degree, and they are an effective training tool. Um, but I have not been exposed to them, and I have not used the alternatives either.
This is the Murphy Media YouTube channel. We are being joined today, and we are very grateful to Ian of DynamicAcquisitions. The other day, in our first attempt at this, which I thought was also very good, we had a question come through, and it said, "Where's this guy's face?" So I got a kick out of that. But on a serious note, your personal security, the security of the guys that you work with, the security of the people that you're training is obviously paramount. So there is a little bit of subterfuge here. And if you want to tell us why that's important, when I talked with Mark the other day, he referred to you as a pixelated human being. The Russians don't know what you look like. Your family may not know what you look like. But can you explain the need to take that away from the Russians, the ability to identify you, protection of the team, protection of the people that you're training?
Yeah, I think we've all been really surprised by what real Russia looks like. Um, the combat effectiveness of Russia, after being told that they were this, military superpower, the disintegration of command and control. It's a sloppy mess. And anybody that doesn't know what they're looking at would go, these guys do not have the capability. They don't have the systems or the training to be a real threat. Um, and I just refuse to accept that. I definitely accept that they have some combat shortcomings. I definitely accept that their tactics are dated and they're paying the price for that. But something that Russia has always been great at is counterintelligence, espionage, electronic warfare. They're, that region has always had the reputation for being able to cultivate and find intelligence wherever they want it, with pretty much unlimited access. And that has always been in the back of my mind. It was on the back of my mind from the beginning. I kind of talked at lengths with people in particular communities about, what is me being too safe and what is the bare minimum, and trying to find like that operational pace somewhere in the middle. I'm not stupid, and I don't think these guys are stupid either. Uh, without saying too much, it would not be incredibly difficult to find out who I am, to find out, my personal background, who my friends and family are, where I come from. Um, However, I've taken steps to at least make it not easy. Uh, and there is always the threat that something, in a counterintelligence or electronic warfare operation could affect what I'm doing now. Um, could put a stop to this training. It could put a stop to me operating in Europe. It could put a damper on when I go back. There's always a threat that, something could be manipulated or changed where it would affect me going home. And I think that's the largest part that people don't understand is this is a kind of uh, attempt to, secure certain information for two goals. I don't want to get black bagged in Ukraine. It's a possibility. You have to understand that this operational environment is not the Middle East. It is not domestically in America. You cannot stereotype or profile someone from Russia. You're in Ukraine. It's former Soviet Union. People here speak Russian. Um, Conducively, both sides speak both languages. There is no personal or physical identifiers that are unique to either one. You're not able to walk down the street and go, that guy, works for the FSB, or that guy is a Russian separatist or supporter, which there are many. The more east you go, the bigger that becomes a problem. The security service of Ukraine is on a daily basis wrapping these guys up. And Russia has done a great job recruiting the Ukrainian civilian sect to do their dirty work, to find targets, to find coordinates, to provide information. So it is a threat every day. And on the opposite side is, how America views what we're doing. We are without a doubt, in my opinion, stepping on toes here. Um, the American government does not want our intervention, from any facet of the volunteer effort, to from the guy running supplies to me training, or people, in a frontline combat capacity. We're stepping on toes. This is a foreign conflict with foreign entities, and we're just a, quote unquote proxy in that. They don't want foreign influence. And there is certainly part of the Ukrainian machine that is afraid of foreign influence, because it might affect how they communicate with foreign governments. Um, so, to build on that, I made one trip back home last year. It was very brief. We had a lot of work to do. It was pretty much a proof of life. Come back, see my family, shake a couple hands. Yeah, I'm still here. See you later. And went straight back to work. But upon entering the country, me and the individual that I were with, we were interrogated. We were detained. We were interrogated. They knew we were coming. There was no surprise. As soon as we reached customs, there was 4 or 5 uniform officers waiting for me. They knew my flight plans. They knew where I was landing. They had an idea of what I'd been doing and where I was. To paint the proper picture, these guys were not, FBI, they were not CIA, they were not NSA. They were Customs and Border Patrol. They were uniformed officers that were assigned to that airport. They weren't investigators, they weren't detectives, they were street cops just like me. Um, But regardless, we were detained. It was really casual, especially once, I told these guys that I was a law enforcement officer, but we were cross-examined. They were interested mostly in uh, our points of contact. How did you find work in Ukraine? Who organized your work? Who organized and facilitated your travel and logistics? Um, we touched briefly on drone technology and some of the things that I had seen. Uh, but it is a really sobering experience to return to your country and be treated with suspicion. I am without a doubt a patriot, self-defined. I love my country. I believe in my country, and it comes first always. Uh, hard to believe me sitting 5,000 miles away. Giving my best to support a foreign nation, but I truly believe that. I love the United States. I'd do anything for my country. Um, so with that in mind, it is a very bleak kind of experience, to be detained and interrogated. So, for those people who really don't understand, what they're seeing, um, there are certainly some confusion about operational security among the Ukrainians, among the civilian population in America. There's this kind of idea created of, if this guy has a space blurred out, then he must be somebody. Uh, he must be on some kind of special ops assignment, or he must have a career or something we can't know about. And nothing could be further of the truth in my case. Exactly what I told you at the beginning of this interview is exactly what I am. I'm a 6-year law enforcement veteran. I have no substantial military experience, and I've had the opportunity to go some really great training. And that's me. To the people in my life, I am a nobody. There's nothing spectacular or out of this world about my career or my dossier or resume. Pretty standard for a law enforcement guy from my generation. Um, but the part they don't see is the threats that we face, that are very real. Uh, this is, no matter where you are situated in Ukraine, it is a hostile environment. You never know who's looking at you. You never know what kind of intelligence they're trying to gather on you, and how might they work off of that. Um, as a cop, I operate on this 360-degree security all the time. Hyper vigilance, hyper awareness, and coming to an environment where I don't have any of that. The least I can do for myself is make it difficult for someone to learn something about me. Um, I'm doing as much as I can within what is reasonable. I mean, you can take one look at me. I'm an easy guy to ID. I don't walk around with my tattoos covered up. I've got shirts that have our logos and shit on them that I'm not shy to wear in public. However, uh, just offering on a silver platter, all my personal identifying information, pieces about our operation, where we operate, who we operate with, affects a lot more than just myself, and I always have to keep that in the back of my mind. One of the first things that happened when I came to Ukraine was a foreign training initiative, I guess you could say, where a lot of the Legion guys were getting their training was hit. It was a mass casualty event, and it was really close to the western border. It's not a place you would expect to have that, especially at the time that I came. Um, and that was kind of like the sobering experience. Like, they were able to get geolocated data from a photo. They were able to launch a successful military operation, and they were able to cause a mass casualty event. They're absolutely capable. They're still capable to this day, and they will continue to be for a long time, because that is Russia's bread and butter. So I hide my face, and I hide the guys, a lot of the guys that I train, I will hide their face as well, because I don't want to make it easy. I'm not stupid. It's still a possibility, and it's just an inherent risk of the operational environment. But no, I hate to kill everybody's surprise. You're not missing anything up here, I promise. but I'm not some special operator. I do not have a long, clandestine operational career. Uh, Everything, I've been completely upfront with you. We just take operational security to that next level of seriousness. Um, if I really wanted to follow through, we wouldn't be having this conversation. I wouldn't have the social profiles that I do to support the company. So we play that middle ground. We try to make it difficult, but also we have a job to do. And if I can't show my work to the people who want to donate or the people who want to be involved, if I can't show the legitimacy of my work, to my peers and people that are in the tactical community, then I'm nobody. I'm not going to get any help. I'm not going to get any assistance. So it is a necessary evil for me to have some kind of public presence. But the blurring and the OPSEC is really to cover the bases. There will come a time when you will pull up Dynamic Acquisitions and you will see my smiling face. I can't wait to share that with you all, but that just isn't right now.
Well, and as you said, we know that Russia specializes in intelligence work. The president is a former KGB officer, former head of the FSB. The defense minister came from the intelligence community, and the backing of the intelligence agency early on was something that was critical to this operation, to this war. So taking those steps and denying the enemy of your friend is absolutely critical. So that's something that we want to respect here also. Something that to kind of move towards the end, the best answer to any question that we've posed to you so far, certainly I think the most realistic answer, the most sobering answer that you've given is, what does victory look like to you? All of these Western leaders, they continue to pound on the desk, they pound on their chest, we're with you till the end. And the way that you frame your answer, as I said, it's real, it's sobering. And the other phrase that's repeated, and I thought about this today, was nothing about Ukraine without Ukraine. But yet we keep hearing until the end, but no one wants to define it. And your answer, I think, to that question shows that we may not necessarily have a right to define it. So what does victory look like to you, Ian?
Sure. Uh, it's worth saying that I know that a lot of foreign volunteers, people that I would consider my peers, have given up an exceptional amount to be here, to the point of no return. There are guys who will feel the financial and lifestyle effects of their volunteer efforts here for the rest of their lives, myself included. However, even though some of us may have made a tremendous amount of sacrifice as it comes to helping here, the time that I've spent with Ukrainians, um, they are without a doubt completely unique to themselves. They have a unique culture. They have a unique social intermingling that we just don't understand as Westerners. That we don't understand as inozemci, which is foreigners. Um, we As much as I want to join the bandwagon and say, victory to me is, all territories returned to Ukraine, including Crimea, and debts paid by Russia and eternal sanctions and whatever else might be packed into that, blissfully perfect world package. I would love to say that. Um, However, I just don't feel like I have any space in order to comment. I don't feel like it's any of my fucking business what Ukraine does. Um, at the beginning of this, I am of the opinion, and will be of the opinion, I would not be involved in this conflict today if this was a strictly military operation. Um, it is the effects that it has had on civilian life and civilian freedoms and liberties that got me involved. Um, people being unfairly and unjustly involved in a violent conflict to the point where it might cost their lives. And we talked about Bucha and Irpin, and seeing those images and kind of how riveting they were for me. Uh, if this was a Ukrainian army versus Russian army with no civilian collateral damage, I'm out. They can fight it out. The territories can go to whoever wants the territories or however they work it out, but it doesn't have anything to do with me. Um, it gets to me at the point where my personal beliefs, as an American, as somebody, that has spent their life in service to others, when there is people paying the price that don't have any reason to be. Uh, and the fault of that lies almost strictly on Russia, almost completely. And so for me, if I were to have an opinion on it, the end for me is the stop of the bloodshed. It's the stop of the conflict. The bullets stop, the bombs stop, and we get to some kind of peaceful negotiation. Um, Now, if you were to ask my Ukrainian brothers and sisters, people I consider family, people I love and respect, immensely, they would tell you exactly what I said, in the beginning of this statement, which is Ukraine. There is no victory for Ukraine until all things are returned. Um, I love that answer. I love the confidence in that answer. And they have the absolute right to preach, believe, and strive for that, opinion. But me as a foreigner, as a Westerner, as somebody who strictly is a small band-aid on a big problem, in this monumental conflict, I can't share in that opinion. Because the truth is for me, you know, for me, it's my guys start coming home. These guys that I train, it's they no longer have to forgo and endure this. Uh, there are people I have trained that are no longer with us. There are friends, families, civilian, both military that I have met, interacted with, trained, been a part of my life for a substantial amount of time that are not here because of this conflict, and they are all Ukrainian. Um, so a personal victory, a personal end for me is this stops. The war stops, the bloodshed stops, the fighting stops. And then Ukraine can decide for themselves what victory looks like. Uh, I can't divide up the country. I can't share an opinion on it. I can't share an opinion on Crimea. I didn't grow up with Crimea. That wasn't a childhood vacation place for me. I didn't grow up on the eastern side of Ukraine. So all this geography, politics, and culture, that's a Ukrainian decision. And I think when it comes to foreign volunteers, people doing something similar to myself, anybody can have any opinion they want. I can't bust on them for that. But when it comes to me and it's coming out of my mouth, victory for me is Ukrainian lives. Victory for me is international lives. The conflict as a whole on both sides to stop, uh, because there really cannot be um, a too positive outcome with the amount of lives that we've lost so far. It's a mess. It will continue to be a mess. It is a political, geopolitical, international nightmare. And, I will sleep better at night knowing that these guys that I call friends and family uh, are doing the exact same thing that I'm going to be doing back in the United States. And that's living their lives and being with their loved ones.
This has been as much a conflict of bullets, rockets, missiles, planes, as it has been about values and Western values, as you said, individual freedoms, the right for people to live their lives the way they choose to live them. And having someone such as yourself, the other volunteers that we've had on, uh, as I called him, the intrepid Mark Carey, our mutual friend, um, the fact that you guys are there and you're reinforcing those Western values, uh, just the basic belief in a safe tomorrow. for those of us that have stuck with this conflict, stuck with the Ukrainian people, or trying to generate more funds, trying to raise awareness of this cause, it gives me a lot of hope for the future that you guys are there and are doing what you're doing. And I think that all Americans who may have to pay attention to this for 5, 6, 7 minutes of the day when they turn on the evening news, it should be heartening to them as well. We're making an investment in freedom loving people who are willing to not undergo donation fatigue, and this is my big soapbox, not undergo donation fatigue or fatigue of turning on the television and seeing this. They're willing to get into a trench and fight for their own basic humanity. And I think that that is something that we haven't been confronted with as a society en masse in a very, very long time. A select few of our bravest go and they do these things, they put on the uniform, and they provide us with those freedoms. So to see someone such as yourself volunteering, giving of himself, his time, his fortune to go and do this, it's, as I said, it should be heartening to every American that people like you exist. So having you on, being able to talk with you as much as we have in the last, for a guy that doesn't do interviews, having spent almost 5 hours with you over the
Yeah,
last 3 days.
your first 3-time appearance. Yeah.
No, it's been great, brother, and I really appreciate you taking the time. As I said, I know you don't do this, so the fact that you've given me as much time of yourself as you have, it's humbling and it's very much appreciated.
Yeah. Well, my answer to your sign off hasn't changed, man. I think you're doing important work. Um, I think this is a historical and monumental moment in our lifetime, and we will see the generational ripple effects of this for a long time. And people are really going to want to know what happened here. And there is a lot of things that I and can't say, and I think that's true for probably everyone you've had on here. And that information spans a lot of categories, but the things that would be detrimental or could be misconstrued to hurt the Ukrainian cause or the volunteer effort, I can't say those things right now. And one day, the real story is going to come out, and people are going to realize what we already know is how absolutely unbelievable this experience has been, on both ends of the extremes. Absolutely horrifying, terrible, barbaric to, bridging cultural divides and building this new generation cooperation. But the true story will come out one day, and you will have amassed the first log of that archive. So, I don't see anybody else doing what you're doing. And when you interviewed Mark, I think I told you first day, if you were good enough for Mark Carey, you were good enough for me. And so I knew that you were doing an important thing, and people believed in what you're doing. So I'm glad we've had so much personal time together. If there's another wedding in my future, I'll definitely shoot you an invite, because I feel like we've really formed this bond of frustration, and so it was a pleasure, man. I really enjoyed doing it, and I look forward to everything you got going on in the future.
Well, I appreciate that. It's very kind of you. And for everyone to know, we are going to put a couple of links in the description. We're going to link the website, and we're also going to link the ability for you to donate to Dynamic Acquisitions. They are doing important work. They are equipping Ukrainian soldiers with the skills they need to survive and drive an invader out of their country. So that will be a critical component going forward. Dynamic Acquisitions is sustained by generous donations. So whatever you can donate, 5, 10, 100, 1,000, $10,000, I am sure Ian will be very grateful, and those donations will be put to good use. So Ian, it's been a pleasure. Is there anything that we didn't cover that might be worth putting out there? Anything at all?
Man, I think you nailed it. I think just as much as the rest of us how pivotal funding and information is. On one aspect, people are making tremendous personal sacrifices to be here, and they are doing good work. I don't think any of us are doing something that is going to change the outcome of this conflict. It is going to play out as it is predetermined. And that's going to be up to the Ukrainians. but we are doing good work. There are people out there saving lives. There are people out there providing a service that wouldn't have been otherwise available. So when you see these people ask for money, ask for donations, understand that the majority of them are exceptional people doing exceptional work. And if they're asking for your help, they need it. Um, and be careful with information. Be careful with the information that you spread and read. This is absolutely a war of information and will continue to be, as will every conflict, that arises in the future. So what you do with information, no matter how much of a reach or impact you have, it does affect things. So be careful with what you got. Make sure you know your facts and be responsible with that information.
Absolutely. And Ian, we look forward to having you back on again. Hopefully not tomorrow. We're going to call it quits for a little while, but it's been a pleasure, my friend. And as soon as this conflict is over, when peace is achieved, you, myself, and Mark, we will be meeting in Crimea, and we're going to be having those beers.
I can't wait, brother.
Awesome. Well, thank you, sir, and you stay safe. And if there's anything we can do in the future, let's put our heads together and make it happen.
You as well.
All right, brother. Take care.
You too.